Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Talk Tuesday for today, April 18th. We are so happy you could be with us today. We have some more exciting content and materials and resources to share with you. So let's get going right away. Just to let you know today's agenda. So we welcome you into the space. I am here, Christine Kilwin from CERC, along with my colleague, Stephen Profit. Anne-Marie Cardisco could be with us today, but we welcome you. We are here with our CSD partners. You're here with Kari Sullivan Custer and Jay Brown as well. And we have an extra special treat where Jay Brown is also going to be our presenter today, giving us some great material and kind of some resources for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, but focusing really on the differences between that and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation of 1973. This is a general overview of the differences. There's a lot that can go back and forth with it, but we're going to just really give you some overview and have some Q&A time as well. And then I'll finish up and wrap up with just some last agenda items, announcements, and contact information. And looking at the Superintendent's Digest, kind of what's new at CSDE. They did actually put out a lot within the last 4 weeks. I was surprised to see all the information shared. But again, if any of these resources you would like to access, you could do the QR code on the PowerPoint presentation, or you could just go right to the website itself. So there is a new contact list for district and family engagement leaders, which is really great. There's a grant opportunity for Career Z Challenge, expanding work-based learning opportunities for Generation Z. We have an update on school mental health specialist grant application, and the deadline did get extended on that. There's an annual elementary and secondary school emergency relief ESSER reporting. A new professional learning series, Behind the Numbers, from data to dashboards. There's a process to file a request for an extension of time to implement Connecticut's approved reading curriculum models of programs. And we know that's been a hot topic in a lot of districts, a lot of schools. So that resource might be very helpful. And there's also a report out, the 21-22 condition of education, training on internet safety for parents, teachers, and child workers. And we also have CSDE Ways series of 15 ways CSDE is supporting workforce development and career readiness. Again, another priority of CSDE and a lot of schools everywhere. So if you want to take a moment and review that as well. 56 million in grants to public schools for air filtration system upgrades, a hot topic in a lot of districts as we move into that question mark for the buildings and facilities piece of getting the air quality where we need it. 5.5 million investment to grow dual credit offerings in high schools, expand pathways to post-secondary readiness. There's also another 21-22 report on student discipline in Connecticut public schools, something really to pay attention to because we do have that disproportionality piece. So really thinking about, how our tier 1, especially school systems, for addressing the inappropriate behavior, but also building systems for appropriate behavior as well. So if you want to take a look at that. Important changes when assessing state and federal grant funds, financial literacy, and mathematics and statistics awareness month. Another hot topic in districts, how do we provide that financial literacy within the mathematics model? Computer science summer professional learning, there's information on that. And finally, the 2023 Connecticut Fire Academy College Fair, especially looking at that kind of career pathways piece. I think that would be really something to look into. And I wanted to put this kind of in the beginning, just as an extra reminder. We'll remind you again at the end. So at the 2022-23 school year, we are ending May 2nd. May 16th is our last date just for this school year together. Don't worry, we are coming up with more ideas for next year and the possible summer session, but we wanted you to know that Talk Tuesdays will not be run in June. Just stay tuned for our summer series and what's coming up next for the next school year. But the last 2 dates for this school year is May 2nd and May 16th. But we hope you all will be with us for those last 2 dates. We do respect and understand the school year gets very busy this time of year. So we want to give you that space to do that. But we are always here. So don't think that we are not. So if you ever need us, you know how to contact us. And with that note, I am going to turn it over to Kari Sullivan Custer.
Good morning, everybody, and Welcome to Talk Tuesday. A lot of folks are getting back from spring break, so welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed their time off and the beautiful weather. If you were local, it was a gorgeous week. But welcome back to Talk Tuesday, and then we have our February data. We don't have our March data yet. We should maybe have it for the next Talk Tuesday. But you can see here that we are holding steady in the first block of columns there, all students. We're a little higher than we were at the end of last June, and we're seeing some small declines in our student groups. This is year-to-date data as of February 2023. The state average is 24.2 for all students, so that you can kind of gauge where you are in your district if you compare to the state average. And then we're going to discuss students with disabilities today specifically. And so that is the fifth block over, kind of in the middle to the right. The data for students with disabilities is down a little bit from last year, about a point. So we're at 33.5% of students with disabilities are chronically absent compared to 34.5 at the end of last year. So a little going in the right direction. How's that? And not great, but still going in the right direction. And addressing the needs of students with special education IEPs is especially important, and because those students tend to be our highest group of students with a chronic absence, and especially if those students are duly identified as English learners or multilingual families and special ed or free and reduced lunch and special ed. So we want to really pay attention to this group in the IEP season. Is it IEP season? I think a lot of IEPs are being done. So this is timely, and I'm really excited to have Jay Brown with us today. The next slide is something new that I looked at that I encourage you to look at your district as well. And this is looking at last year compared to this year. And so this year is the yellow line. We started this year at 22.8, a percentage point higher than last year in our chronic absence rates. We stayed about the same in October, but in November this year, we really saw the spike in respiratory illnesses. So we went up to 25.4 in November. December, we stayed high, but then we had a nice drop in January as students were starting to feel better. A lot of our initiatives and strategies, interventions were working. We're a little bit higher in February, but you can see we're trending lower than we were last year. You can also see from this, that gives us some hope, is that last year we did trend it downwards during the spring. So hopefully our chronic absence rates will continue to go down for March, April, and May. And we had a spike in June, which is typical, right? And June is a tough month for attendance, and that's when a lot of our students might hit 18. So right now, I would think you'd be looking at students who are missing, around 14 days of school to keep them from missing 18 by the end of the year. Those kids are about 10 to 14 days, maybe not 10, 12 to 14 days. Let's try and make individualized contact with some of these students and make a deal. Like, let's be in school every day. Let's finish this year strong. You'll also see at the end, June, we ended our year-to-date monthly chronic absence rate in June was 24.9. But over the summer, as the school districts validate and certify their data, and we have corrections that were made over the school year, we ended up with a 23.7 chronic absence rate last year. The year before, we were at 19. So that was the first year, full school year of the pandemic. So let's see if we can get our chronic absence rates to continue to go down and support our students and families who are at risk of being at 18 days. So the next slide, please. So I'm repeating this. We had it last Talk Tuesday, but there's some strategies from attendance workers to avoid the spring dip. We know that the week before and the week after, and even after that, attendance tends to go down, and our chronic absence rates tend to go up. So they've got some ideas here. Some of them are tried and true, shows and field trips and breakfast bunch, and really looking at your approach to why kids are missing absence, so that you're not being punitive and that you're being more supportive. And the field trips might be what make kids come to school. And so by withholding those field trips, that'll be another day. If they're not able to go to the field trip, they'll miss that day of school. So just really thinking intentionally about how you're addressing attendance. Next slide, please. So coming soon, LEAP 101 trainings. LEAP is the Learner Engagement Attendance Program. It's a relational home visiting approach that supports and re-engages families and students who are missing too much school. It's research-based. The research was just issued in January. Tier 2 strategy that improves school attendance and improves a sense of belonging in school with many other positive benefits. We have a LEAP grant program that is in 14 districts. We are not at this time expanding the number of districts that are getting LEAP funds. But if you have home visitors, school counselors, or any other folks who are doing home visits, teachers even, especially, I guess, they're welcome to join us for a LEAP 101 training to learn about our approach to home visiting that works. So upcoming days are May 31st and June 5th. Francisco Beres at the Connecticut Home Visits Hub will be sending out announcements. We'll make sure everybody gets it. And you can contact him if you want more information before the announcement comes out. Next slide, please. So we want to do a shout out for Stamford Public Schools. There is the Dean of Students, and he's a football coach, Jamar Green at Stamford High School, and his students created this get your smile muscles ready, because you're going to smile, this video for to encourage kids to come to school every day. So let's go with that.
Christine, you have to share the sound.
Yeah.
Uh-oh,
It's working.
it's working, but not my Google.
Okay.
Ooh. All right, hang on one second. Sorry, all.
This is a song you will leave singing.
Mhm.
I think it's
Yeah. Guess you can go to class too. Yeah. Guess you can go to class too.
We have the sound, but not the video.
There it is.
Class
Good.
too.
Keep it going.
One day you can run this world if you go to class too. What you know about hanging in the halls, chilling in the bathroom, vaping in the stalls? You gotta college, get the necessary skills and prepare for college. In school and on time is your first step, so you can improve, strive for success. Attendance matters, so do your best. Get good grades and pass your tests. Go to school every day, getting good grades is gonna pay. All you gotta do is find a way. What more you want me to say? Hold up, you don't know, now you know. Being green gon' hit you with the flow. Change your mindset, time for you to grow. Don't wanna see you skipping no more. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. One day you can run this world if you go to class too. I go on and on again. Classes in session, we don't know where you've been. Go earn credits for classes that you attend. So hopefully you could be valedictorian if you believe you can achieve and graduate. Make this world do something great. But the time is now, no time to waste. Get your education and don't be late. Go to school every day. Getting good grades is gonna pay. All you gotta do is find a way. What more you want me to say? Hold up, you don't know, now you know. Being green gon' hit you with the flow. Change your mindset, time for you to grow. Don't wanna see you skipping no more. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. Yeah, cause you can go to class too. One day you can run this world if you go to class too.
Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed that. See if I can get back to the Zoom here. With that, I hope everyone enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and you know, the kids seem to really be into it, and it's a type of song that you just can't get out of your head. There's a nice reference to attendance works and a little bit of learning at the end about the importance of attendance. So I don't know, maybe we should have a video contest about attendance. You know, we saw a couple weeks ago that Manchester's got talent. Now we know New Haven's got, or Stamford's got talent. We know New Haven has talent too. So maybe we should have a video contest. That would be a lot of fun and get the kids engaged in messaging around attendance. But with that said, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Jay Brown, who's going to talk about addressing student attendance with students who have IEPs and some special things to pay attention to. So with that, Mr. Brown.
Thanks, Kari. And Christine, if you could just pull up the PowerPoint. First thing I want to do is just kind of apologize to everyone. I'm in the middle of a cold, so my voice might go in and out, but I'll do my best. I don't think there'll be too many issues, but
Jay, it looks
I'm
like
going-
Christine is frozen right now. She is trying to reboot.
okay.
Does anyone else have the
There
slide?
she is. There she is. Uh-oh. Okay. So just to kind of get us started while we're waiting for an opportunity for Christine to come back on, is what I'd like to do is take some time to go through, sometimes it's very misunderstood, the differences between IDEA, which is the Federal Special Education Regulation, and Section 504. Can be a lot of confusion around that. And these are two critical tools that you could use to help students with disabilities or students who qualify for 504 to improve their attendance. So I'd really like to take an opportunity to just give you kind of a 30,000-foot view of the differences between the two. And Christine, are we ready to go? Is it?
She has logged off and it looks like she's trying to get back on right now, Jay.
Oh, okay. Who brought this up?
Looks like Steve Profit.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, so just before we advance, I just want to bring to everyone's attention, take a look at the title of this slide. And sometimes we just don't realize, we hear IDEA all the time, but it's actually called Individuals with Disability Education Act. That was last reauthorized in 2004. So that's what IDEA is, if you weren't aware of that. And usually for 504, we usually just call it either Section 504 or 504, but it's actually called Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So you see, there's a huge difference in the timing of these two federal laws as well. Two completely different federal laws. One is strictly special education, and one is not special education. 2004, IDEA was last redone in 19 years ago. Sounds like a long time, and it is. But when you take a look at Section 504 and the act that goes along with that, that's now 50 years old with no revisions. So you're going to see as I go through the slides, there's some really dated kind of language in there. The intent is the same, the content is fine, but there's dated language, and I'll kind of bring that to your attention. Steve, would you mind going to the next slide, please? So what we're going to talk about are the core differences between IDEA and 504. And each of these bullets will have its own slide that we'll talk about. But basically, you'll notice that there's differences in the categories of the law, where they fall as far as the federal law. Certainly differences in the goal and what they're aiming for, what they're trying to get accomplished. Differences in how students become eligible for each of those services under either IDEA or Section 504. They use very different definitions of disability. Again, you're going to see that in Section 504, some of the language when we talk about disability or handicap is very dated, language that we don't use anymore, that we've revised. You're going to see that there's different types of evaluation the criteria for evaluation under each of those. And then, of course, as you know, the scope of services is very different under these two areas. So we'll go through each of those. Steve, would you go to the next slide, please? Also, there'll be opportunities for questions and answers at the end. And I invite Steve and Kari to jump in anytime they have something that they'd like to add to any of these. And then I hope to have a conversation later on about any questions that you have. But you'll see here, as far as the first bullet, different categories under the law. So two very different federal laws. IDEA is strictly an Education Act law. So every part of it has to do with education. So even if you take pieces of IDEA out of context and print it somewhere or whatever, it always has to be assumed that what it's talking about is education. Any kind of environmental education, anything that has to do with education, that's what IDEA is about. Section 504 is very different. It's not an education law. It's a civil rights law. So it goes well beyond, it's much broader, it goes well beyond education. It is a civil, because it's a civil rights law, it goes into every part of life, which you're going to see. Steve, if you go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So let's talk about the goals or the reasons that these laws were written. IDEA, being an education law, is very different and very robust and very specific, with an aim and a goal that's moving the people who benefit from it towards success. Whereas in Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, it's not moving towards success, it's moving towards access. And basically what that means is, in Section 504, what they're saying, what it boils down to is they're saying, I'm going to put you on an equal playing field with everyone else. I'm going to give you the same access that everyone has to whatever part of life we're talking about at that particular time. IDEA is not that. IDEA goes beyond access. IDEA says, yes, we're going to give you access, but we're also going to build an individualized program so that you can be almost guaranteed success. Now, obviously, it can't guarantee success, but it's aimed at guaranteeing success. That's why an IEP is written, to get the student as close as possible to a successful educational career and being a productive citizen afterwards. So again, two different goals. IDEA is aimed at success. Section 504 is broader. Well, more limited actually. It's aimed at access, just equal playing field. Does that kind of make sense? All right, Steve, let's go to the next slide, please. So now we get into a little bit of the nitty gritty about these two when we talk about the eligibility criteria. IDEA is much less broad, so it gets very specific. Because it's an education law, IDEA has identified 13 disabilities that apply. If you are a student that doesn't fall under one of those 13 disabilities, IDEA is not available to you. You have to be a student with one of those 13 disabilities, and we'll talk about what they are in just a minute. In addition to having one of those 13 disabilities, in order to be eligible for services, many of you, I'm sure, know that the disability has to adversely affect the student's educational performance. And you'll see here I put educational in italics. And what I'm talking about is, many of you have read or seen IEPs, and you know that when we talk about present levels of performance, we know that we talk about not only academic progress, but functional performance. So when you bring the academic and the functional pieces together, that's what we're talking about here as far as the educational performance. So one of the 13 disabilities, if you're identified with one of the 13, now they take a look to decide whether or not the disability you have that's identified adversely affects your educational performance. If it does, you have an opportunity to qualify and be eligible for services. under IDEA. And of course, that all has to happen through what we call the planning and placement team process. So IDEA requires a formal PPT. Now, all that said, Section 504, you'll see, is very different. It's broader. It's not just based on those 13 disabilities that are identified in IDEA. And 504, they talk about the individual who's receiving the service having to have a physical or mental impairment. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. But you have to have a physical or mental impairment, and then it has to go beyond. Not only do you have to have the impairment, but that impairment must substantially limit one or more major life activities. So like in IDEA, you have to have the 13 disability, one of the 13 disabilities, and then it must adversely affect your educational performance. With Section 504, you have to have a physical or mental impairment and that impairment must substantially limit one or more major life activities. And they talk about those major life activities being things like, and I have it written at the bottom of the slide, it may be too small for you to see, but caring for yourself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working. Those are what's identified in the act under the law. And you can see how there's some overlap when, for instance, when the major life activity that's impacted is learning, obviously you see that there's overlap with IDEA, right? So now you have to have the physical and mental impairment, has to substantially limit one or more major life activities, and you have to have a record of such impairment, or at least be regarded as having that impairment. So those things put together give you the opportunity to become eligible for services under 504. And that's all done not through the PPT process, but they use the term, it requires a knowledgeable team, not a planning and placement team, but a knowledgeable team. So it could be anyone. There's no criteria in 504 as there is in IDEA on who has to comprise that team. In IDEA, it's very specific who has to be a part of that team. In 504, there is no specificity around that, just a knowledgeable team. And Steve, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you, sir. So here are what I mentioned are the disabilities that we talked about. What are the physical and mental impairments? What are the 13 disabilities? On the left, you'll see, and I'm sure you're all aware of these, the 13 different bulleted items are all of the recognized and identified disabilities that you must have one of, or at least one of, in order to have receive services under IDEA. You'll notice that there's, I put here that under IDEA, we still list the fourth bullet there says emotional disturbance. And under federal language, that's still what they call it. But next to it, I did note Connecticut changed their language, which again, I'm sure you're all aware of. We no longer call it emotional disturbance, we call it emotional disability. Now let's jump over to Section 504. It's a much broader definition of disability. When they talk about it being a physical or mental impairment, look at those two bullets. You'll see all kinds of different things that don't really have a place in any one of those 13 disabilities identified under IDEA. So this is much broader. This takes in many more kinds of disabilities than IDEA does. Where you see some overlap with IDEA is in that second bullet. And again, I mentioned that there's going to be some dated language. You'll see in that second bullet, they still use the term mental retardation. We've long since moved to intellectual disability, but because this language is 50 years old, at the time they were using mental retardation, so that's in there. You'll see that they use the term, oh, could you go back please for a second, Steve? Thanks. They use the term emotional or mental illness. Again, we don't use that term. IDEA called it emotional disturbance. Connecticut calls it emotional disability. The difference in 50 years versus 19 years as far as the language there. But they do mention specific learning disabilities. So there's a direct overlap there that you can apply for, qualify and be eligible for 504 with a specific learning disability, just as you could under IDEA. Okay, Steve, thanks. If you could go to the next slide now. All right. Again, it's not huge, but there are some different evaluation criteria, and it's basically in the language used that is the difference between IDEA and Section 504. So there's very specific criteria in IDEA. The language says that it requires a child to be fully and comprehensively evaluated by a multidisciplinary team. And each of those pieces is very important. You'll notice that oftentimes you hear the term a comprehensive evaluation, and that's all decided at a PPT, what that will look like for any individual student. There is also, as far as evaluation, the criteria that a student must be reevaluated every 3 years. And it also provides for an independent educational evaluation. So you have the opportunity, if a parent disagrees with any evaluations obtained by the district, they can ask for an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, under IDEA. Okay. Under Section 504, it's very different. It's a broader evaluation criteria. The way they talk about it is an evaluation draws on information from a variety of sources and is documented, which again is part of IDEA, but we get more specific in IDEA. Decisions in Section 504, decisions about the child, evaluation data, and placement options are made by knowledgeable individuals. Yes, that's also true in IDEA, but under IDEA, those knowledgeable individuals are part of a PPT, a part of a planning and placement team, or they can't be part of the process. They have to be part of the PPT. And reevaluation has to take place under 504, but they don't talk about it having to be every 3 years. They call it periodically. So it can be determined under 504 how often a student is going to be reevaluated. And there is also no provision and no right to an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, under Section 504. So Steve, if you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you, sir. And of course, I don't think there's ever any question about very different scope of services offered under IDEA versus Section 504. So under IDEA, it's much more robust, where the services include specialized instruction and related services, in addition to possibly having accommodations and or modifications to work. Under Section 504, the language really only talks about adaptations and accommodations. It's not talking about specialized instruction, okay? Keeping in mind that oftentimes related services are not considered necessarily specialized instruction, because it's very appropriate to have those under 504. So it could be considered an accommodation. Okay, so under IDEA, very specific, specialized instruction, related services, accommodations, and modifications. Section 504 really just focuses on what they call adaptations and accommodations. So oftentimes I hear questions from parents around, my child has an IEP, I also want them to have a Section 504 plan, which there's nothing in regulations that says you can't do that. However, if a child has an IEP, then everything that's would be in a 504 plan would also be or should be in that IEP. So it makes a 504 plan unnecessary, if that makes sense. Okay. And Steve, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Just want to make you aware of something that you won't have to go back and listen to the recording of Jay Brown bending your ear, hopefully, because there's some pending legislation. It just went to committee on March 16th. It's coming out of the General Assembly. It's called House Bill number 6644. But the actual name is an act concerning the distribution of information regarding special education to families and students. It's unfortunate this has to be put in legislation. We probably should have been doing this a long time. It's likely to pass, but it has not passed yet. So just be aware of that. If it does go through, what it's basically saying is by the first of this coming year, the Department of Education will need to put together an informational handout targeted towards students that will basically explain their rights under IDEA and what that looks like, and what a Section 504 looks like in their rights under Section 504. So a nice informational handout will be designed if this goes through. So you won't have to do some extra research. It'll be there for you. It'll be kind of, I don't know how many pages it'll be. I'm sure it'll have all the information you need, but it'll be concise, especially if it's targeted for students. So just be aware that there's potential legislation coming out. And with that, I'd like to invite folks to ask questions if you have any. I can't really see the chat, so I'll ask my colleagues to let me know if anybody puts anything in the chat. Otherwise, let's take a look and see if anybody has any
Absolutely.
questions.
They could feel free, raise your hand too, or just open your mic, well, whatever you feel like doing. I know we had a hand that went up before, and I want to make sure we answered that question as well.
Yeah, I had a question, but actually when I read the next slide, it answered it, and it was about the 504. It's not it's temporary. If child has a temporary ailment, it can be covered by the 504. It doesn't have to be a permanent one. So a 504 can cover a child, let's say, that has a vision impaired for a little bit, like he has surgery on his eyes and he needs some special accommodations in the classroom for now for a couple of months, but then later on it can be nulled and then over with. So it doesn't have to be permanent. But then I read it on the next slide, so that's
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep.
Absolutely.
Jay, that was a great overview and side by side, something I've been interested in for a long time. There's always been, it's not special ed, it's 504. You got to call the feds to find out about 504. There's always sort of this mystery about 504. And thank you so much for taking the time to put it side by side and making it so people like me can understand
No problem.
the difference. And I put the slides in the deck. It took me a while. I mean, in the chat, it took me a while, but I think Jay's slides are so clear that you can just take those and put them right into a document and share with folks on your teams, so that they have a better understanding of the difference between the IEP and the 504. So any other questions about that? It's also something we want to thank our advisory team, and we do have a state attendance advisory team with many of our districts here today represented on that team, and this was something they thought would be really helpful for folks. So we thank them for this information.
So am I sharing my screen right now?
So I'm
You
sharing
are.
mine. Steve, if you want to share yours, that's fine.
Yeah,
but-
let me share mine.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna, to supplement Jay Brown's talk, which he did a great, I'm gonna just drop in a few documents. Can you see my screen now?
So,
Not yet.
Not yet.
Try this, see if you see this. See Perry Zirkel?
Yes.
Okay, so Perry Zirkel is going to be here in May. He comes every year, twice a year, to do big overviews for a lot of our 504 coordinators, which mainly in our schools are our school counselors, sometimes our school social workers, psychologists, and principals, assistant principals. But I just dropped this in the chat. He does a 504 update, and he also has some real good publications, and some are some of his forms. So I just encourage you to see that. I'm also going to drop in the chat a great document to support our work around chronic absenteeism. So this came out, this was not too long ago. Let me just get this. right here. All right, so this is a great document for you to child find obligations under 504. I'll just drop that in. It's going to look like this. Oh, wait, bigger. This is a good tool. This was developed by the National Center on Educational Outcomes, but we have WestEd, we have NASD, which is the National Association for Special Ed Directors, our OSEP office, and Council for Chief State School Officers, with some really good documents about chronic absenteeism and around how they connect to 504 and what you should do for child find, because 504 and IDA have child find.
And child find means that if a student has too many absences, or if you tell me if I'm wrong, too many absences or behavioral issues like discipline, then they need to have some assessments, right? Or go to a PPT, right? Okay.
That's mostly true, Kari. Child find is in the federal reg IDEA,
Correct.
and it doesn't talk about that, but Connecticut went farther, as we often do, and wrote it into the Connecticut regulations. It's not called
Right.
child find there, but it's called a prompt referral. And so exactly what you said requires a prompt referral to special education.
So here's the key, right here. Excessive absenteeism by itself is not a basis for suspecting a student has a disability. But however, a school district's child find audit may be triggered when there are significant absences and a reason to believe the absences are linked to a disability. But in here, in this document was cited a great Connecticut resource. I'm going to share it with you right now. So Connecticut was highlighted here.
This is our prevention and intervention guide.
Right. So you open this up.
Thank you, Kari.
Right here.
It's a little bit further down. There it is. Reducing chronic absence. Go back up.
Right here.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's a real good prevention for schools and districts. And what are some different interventions you could use and put in place?
At the end of this document are tiers of, and it identifies different approaches for in different tiers, different interventions and strategies that you can use. So there's a lot of information there. I put a link to this document in the chat. Thank you, Steve, for highlighting this.
Yeah, so that was in that document. And the last one, I'm going to just drop in, which we had in the chat. Is this document.
And then Jay, I don't know if you noticed, there's some questions in the chat too. We need to.
I just saw that from Diane. And Diane, maybe you could unmute and tell me what documentation you're talking about, and hopefully I'll be able to answer you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good, thanks. I noticed a previous entry just asking if medical documentation is required for 504, because I know that has come up numerous times for me throughout the process. And in one of your slides, it actually referred to needing documentation. So I was just curious if it's medical documentation versus just a parent commenting that there's an issue.
Well, in the definition under section 504, part of the criteria is that there needs to be some documentation of the disability, that the child has the impairment, or, and they use the word or, the student is generally considered to have the impairment. So while documentation is the standard and generally what districts are looking for, there is some wiggle room in the statute, in the reg, that says or is generally considered to have the impairment. Now, what that looks like could be very debatable, which is why I think most districts err on the side of caution and ask for medical documentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jay.
Oh, you're welcome.
The last thing I'm going to just drop in, how many are familiar with the 504 preview series from the State Department of Ed? So right now, all of our, I'll just share these with you. I'm just going to share my screen. So right now, we have these series called the 504 preview series. They're on the new IEP website. So I would encourage you, if you are 504 coordinators or you have school counselors that you oversee and supervise, that they look at these two preview series, because they now are required to enter 504 meetings and plans into our new CT SED system. And as you know, so I'm gonna just drop that in the link in the chat. I would encourage you to see these.
Steve, I also included that link in the PowerPoint. You'll see it embedded in the slides as well.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to put that in. And last but not least, as I shared, we also have, as you know, we have a new IEP. We also have a new, and I just dropped this in the chat, a new 504 plan. So as you know, we're rolling out, we've rolled out a whole new IEP this year, but here's a draft. There you go. All right, so here's the new draft 504 plan. I just dropped this in the chat. So that's all connected to the 504 series. Okay. Oops. All right, so you got that in the chat.
Thank you. I think there's some do you have any other resources, Steve?
Nope, that's it. Those are just,
Thank you. Those are great.
Thank you.
Those
Those are
are just-
great resources, Stephen. I appreciate it.
yeah, those are just the ones right here. So I just dropped that in the chat, and you can find it online too. Here's your eligibility determination, your 504 meeting notes, some of it, what are the accommodations that you're going to put in place? All
You
that.
know, we had a conversation when we were planning this yesterday about 504s in attendance and being clear in the 504 plan about when students should be in school, when it's okay to be out of school, so that the 504 plan isn't just an excuse for missing days, right? Because that you want to be very clear, both in IEPs and 504s, about what the strategies are to make sure the student is attending school on a regular basis. I had an experience with a young lady who said, well, I have a 504, so I can stay home anytime I want. And, so, you know, so especially when we're talking about issues related, yeah, I won't say that, but definitely you want to be clear with the family around when they should come to school, when they should stay home, and what are the strategies for when letting them know that the student needs to stay home. I hope that's helpful. Yeah. So what were some of the other questions in here? I know, Christina, there's so many resources, and we hear you, Jeannie, about having a handout for families, a 504 and a side-by-side. Right now we have Jay's slides, but I wonder if there's anything at the federal government level, Jay, or something the Bureau of Special Ed might want to put together is just a 1 or 2 pager with a side-by-side.
That's
Family
not a
friendly.
bad idea. In doing research for the presentation, there's so much out there, but be careful if you Google it and pull a handout off the web, because I found that it wasn't all accurate, that there were some even misconceptions and things that agencies were preparing for their clients, not federal agencies, et cetera. So be careful what you pull. But I'm really thinking that this legislation, this bill is going to pass. And so I
Okay.
think in short order, there's going to be some really good information put out
It
by the
should.
department around this.
It should, because it is important for a parent to know the difference between an IEP and a 504. And actually yesterday we were dealing with a family that the child has an IEP, and somebody went up to her and said, oh, you should get a 504 too. And I'm like, no, I mean, if he has an IEP, that trumps the 504.
Right.
That's
It's
what I
totally
said to them.
unnecessary. Anything
And I
that's
said,
in a
it's not
504
necessary.
should
So,
be in an
and-
IEP.
So
Yeah.
to have that side by side so they can understand, if you have an IEP, you don't need a 504, but if you have a 504, it's something not permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent. It could be something permanent and not necessarily need an IEP, but it needs a 504. But you can stick with the 504 and revamp it every year, once a year. And then the IEP, you can revamp it every 3 years. But and in consideration with some of the families, if the parent needs to reevaluate like once a year, let's say the kid has another illness, I always say to the parent, you have the right to ask for a reevaluation. Not only every 3 years, you can call and say, listen, can you reevaluate my child because of this, because he has this more to add to the IEP. They can do that. So they always always ask for a little bit more. I'd rather them be cautious than be on the safe side.
Well,
So-
one thing to be aware of, Gene, you're absolutely right. With the 504, if there's a 504 plan, they should be looking at that annually anyway. But the reevals are something that's a little bit less defined. Under IDEA, the reevals have to be every 3 years. Under 504, it just says periodically. But 3 years is a long time to wait. Lots changes for our kids in 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
So that, the expectation would be probably best practice would be to do it at least every 3, if not sooner.
So Gene, a lot of our family, how many have ever heard of the website understood.org? www. It's an excellent website and resource for families of children with disabilities. And it's great for your general education staff. We reference it a lot. Here is I dropped it in the chat. So this is written mainly for parents so that they understand. I'm going to tell you, it's a great side-by-side and it complements what Jay wrote, what the difference is, what one does and what doesn't, so that families know that it's written in who's eligible.
Thank you. I got it. I opened it
Look
up.
at that,
and
it's got
saved it
site-
on my computer.
It's
It's
got all
everything
the
like,
same
for example,
information. It's
Jay,
perfect.
I can share with our team too over here with the dropout prevention specialist also.
like, for example, Jay, you brought up the independent educational evaluation. Yes for IDA, no for 504. Who creates it? And it's very, very well done. So I dropped that in the chat for you. All the way to notice, consent, how often, how to resolve disputes, funding. It's a great website to use for a lot of, just besides 504, but for IEPs, what they can bring to helping parents build their knowledge. All right, so I dropped that in the chat for you. It's a great, great, great toolkit for your families. And the last one I dropped in was actually from the Office of Civil Rights, as Jay referenced. It was the 504 FAQ, all of frequently asked questions. Okay.
Christine, maybe when we send out the follow-up, we can put some of these resources in there too.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So I will definitely make sure I get them all from Steve and Kari and
In the
Jay. So
chat, yeah,
yeah, and that way you'll have it in one email, just in case you're having trouble downloading or opening. I'll send it along.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, all
Okay.
right, well, I don't see any more questions. I can see Christina putting some of this in her binders that she presented about a couple weeks ago, right? Christina and her team, how they put all their policies and things in one place for everyone. So, okay, I think we want to close out. It's time to.
Absolutely. So let me just quickly bring up our PowerPoint. Okay, so all we had, you'll see in the PowerPoint is just some questions to consider. So things to think about as, you know, as you get into this work and thinking about where your school and district is with 504 plans and the development process, kind of your role in that process, or who has a role, and who to really go to within your district. So you'll see this, we're thinking some maybe breakout sessions, but we had some great dialogue together at Talk Tuesday. So I just put this in here so you'll have it as a resource. So just a reminder again, May 2nd and May 16th are our last two Talk Tuesdays of the 22-23 school year. We will let you know more about our summer series coming up, but we will not have any Talk Tuesdays for the month of June. And as always, please keep in touch with us. If you need anything, reach out. I will definitely follow up. So many resources, they were fantastic, but we'll put them all in one place for you so they're easier for you to find. And if you need anything, we're here for you. So thank you for joining us today. This was great. Thank you, Jay.
And
You did a
everyone,
fabulous job.
yay, Jay.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Great to see you.
Great job, Jay.
Great job. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Let's stop the recording.
Oh, yes. Stop recording.
know.
There we go.